My name is Bonnie Fenton, and I will be moderating you through this workshop this afternoon as we look at mobility measures and sustainable urban mobility planning. And so we can get started. I'll show my screen here now. You should be able to see my screen, I hope, with the ABCs. And yeah, as I said, my name is Bonnie Fenton. I'll be moderating the session this afternoon. It's now 12:30 and will continue until 1:30, so we have exactly 1 hour to go through. And that will include a little bit of an introduction, a presentation by my colleague Susanne Böhler-Baedeker, and then a time for questions at the end of the session. So just to move on. As I said, welcome to a webinar this afternoon. I would like to give you a few tips about using the webinar tool in case anybody's new to this. I'll tell you a little bit about the TIDE project, and we'll talk about who's here, and I'll introduce you to my colleague, Dr. Susanne Böhler-Baedeker, and then we'll have some questions and discussions for about 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the session. So with regard to your participation here, in case you're worried about it, we can't hear you. So you're automatically muted. That's the default setting. It's not that we don't want to hear from you, because we do, but if there are a lot of people talking or there's any sort of background noise, it can be quite distracting with a large group here. So the default setting is mute, but that doesn't mean you can't participate. We have 3 different options for that, which I'll explain. The first one is that you can raise your hand, which is a little button with a hand icon that you should see on the right side of your screen. And if you do that, your hand raising appears on my screen, and I can call you and unmute you so that you can ask your question or make your comment if you'd like to do that. And the other option for participating is simply to write the question in. And you have here in the bottom right hand of your screen, you should have your question screen there, and that's to write your question or comment and send that directly to me as the moderator. So in case you're wondering, those questions don't go to the entire group. They just come to the moderator, and I can then either ask them to the group if it's a group question, or pass it on to the presenter, so whatever is appropriate. And the third form of communication that we have in this webinar is called a poll, and it's simply questions that we will ask throughout. And there are a couple of points that we would like to find to get some information from you with regard to our topic. And so we'll put the poll question out, and you can simply choose your answer and send it back in, and then we'll share the answers with everybody, so you can get an idea as well about some of the other people who are participating in the webinar today. And just with regard to the people who are participating, I can tell you, you can see the list there on the right of your screen, but I can also tell you that from what we could determine, I can say we have 32 people registered for the webinar, and from what I could determine from email addresses and other ways is that we have 12 countries represented in 19 different cities. So it's a real range across Europe from east to west and north to south. So we've got a wide range of people participating today, which we're very pleased about. And I'll tell you just a little bit about the TIDE project, just so you know what this is all about and the purpose of our webinar today, or part of it. And the first thing is we'd just like to describe a little bit about how we understand innovation within the TIDE project. And we take a relatively pragmatic perspective, I would say, in that something doesn't need to be entirely new to everybody, but it needs to be new to you. So if there's some sort of mobility measure that's perhaps mainstream in another country, but not to you or not in your city, then we would consider it an innovation within your city or region. And the idea within our project is to allow cities and regions to transfer innovative ideas from other areas to theirs in an effective and successful way. And this is to create better solutions to existing problems and that are more effective than perhaps solutions that you've used in the past. And spreading innovation, we have ideas that are implemented by innovators. You can see, and that's on the left side of the graph of the bell curve, which is about 2%, 2.5%. And the next group that takes on is the early adopters, followed by the early majority, and then the late majority and the laggards, the people that are, or the groups, the regions, cities that are the very last to follow. And within the TIE project, we're looking mainly at the early adopters and the early majority. So those are the groups that we're focusing on. So it's not necessarily the very first people that are innovating, but those that can learn from that first group. So we focus on the early adopters and the early majority stakeholders, and the main object is to remove barriers, whether they be real or simply perceived, so that innovative solutions can be implemented in new places. And the TIE project is involved in 5 different topic areas around the theme of mobility, and the first one is financing models and pricing measures, which is involved mainly with parking pricing and road pricing, urban road pricing, and non-motorized transport is the second topic, with cycling and walking, followed by network and traffic management, which focuses mainly on data, and electric vehicles, which includes clean urban logistics. And the final topic is public transport organization. And you can see across the bottom the SUMP, which is our way of indicating that sustainable urban mobility planning is a cross-cutting theme that cuts across all of the 5 topic areas that we're dealing with. So it's important in everything, and that's one of the main reasons that we're here today and talking about that in this workshop. And just a little bit more about TIE. If you're interested in getting involved, we have several activities and publications that you might want to take a look at. We have a workshop coming up at the end of February, taking place in Brussels, and it will be basically one full day, or noon to noon, focusing entirely on sustainable urban mobility planning in the context of innovation and mobility measures. We have another conference coming up in June, the final one for the project. We also have several publications that might be of interest to you, and they're listed here. And those are available on the TIE website, which is also linked to here. So if you're interested in following up on any of those, you can do that. The other opportunity that you have is to go to the TIE YouTube page, which is where the recording of this webinar will also be put up within the next few days as well. So you have the opportunity to listen to this again or share it with somebody else if you'd like to. And the final learning opportunity that we offer is online courses that are focused on, we have 10 different courses focused on the 5 different themes that we're working on within the TIE project, so on specific aspects of those. And the courses were running throughout the spring and summer of 2014. They are completed now, but we have left the course content up on our website, the Rupprecht Academy website. So if you would like to take a look at the course content and see if there's something you can learn from that, there's lots of links to connect to and some questions that you might want to think about from within your own local context. So these are all opportunities that you have to learn. And of course, today's learning opportunity is through this webinar, and the main component of this is the presentation that will come in just a moment from Susanne Böhler-Baedeker. Just so you know who she is and what she has done and what she is doing. Susanne has been working on transport for 20 years. She has a background in spatial planning and recently co-authored a publication entitled Urban Mobility Plans, National Approaches and Local Practice. And with that, I would like to turn the webinar over to Susanne, who will speak to you for about half an hour, and after that, we'll have time for questions and discussion afterwards. So thank you, and enjoy the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. Hello, my name is Susanne, and I hope you can see my screen, so my presentation as well as me. And as Bonnie said, I will give you a presentation about sustainable urban mobility planning and the innovation aspects of SUMP. So what kind of potential or innovation potential provides SUMP actually for cities or for the implementation of innovative measures. And if I have to answer the question, is SUMP an innovation itself, I would say yes, it's an innovation. It's an innovative concept, and I think I would like to share some thoughts about that with you. So first of all, I would like to give you some background information, what it's all about, why is SUMP important for European cities and probably also worldwide. I would like to tell you something about EU policy and national policy, but more about operational challenges on the local level. So let's start. So if you are looking on the situation European cities are facing right now in regard of urban transport, you will see a lot of different challenges, like that a lot of people are exposed to air pollution in European cities, and which is quite a strong risk for citizens in the cities. A lot of cities are exposed also to nighttime noise, traffic noise during nighttime. A lot of people are spending a lot of time in congestion while commuting. We are also facing in several parts of Europe a growing urban population, which puts pressure on the development of urban transport infrastructure. In comparison to that, we have also cities with a shrinking situation, which provides other challenges for the cities. What we can see is that a lot of cities are already facing those challenges and try to transform their urban mobility pattern in order to promote more sustainable or more environmentally friendly modes like non-motorized modes, so that more people walk or more people cycle to work or for leisure purposes, or use public transport for longer distances. Let's go to the next slide with a kind of a very with very similar findings, which comes from the EU and which is the background for the targets the EU has set with EU policy. So the European Commission sees that a lot of agglomerations in Europe have severe congestion problems, that mobility is quite a huge source of CO2 emission, and that a lot of cities struggle to meet legal requirements for ambient air quality. As well, there is a high risk to get into a road accident, and we have 11,000 people of road fatalities per year. And a huge requirement of EU policy is to have a more balanced development and integration of different modes, public transport, cycling and walking, together with cars. If we are looking at cities, and here I would like to share with you some findings from a survey we carried out in the Challenge project, a EU finance project about sustainable urban mobility planning with 33 cities. And we asked them, what are your most severe problems related to transport? And we see that most of the city have multi-interrelated problems. So not only one problem like congestion or noise, but also poor air quality, poor accessibility. So cities should have to solve their problems in different dimensions. On the other hand, they have reduced opportunities for to act. They have difficult economic situation, but also lack of staff and resources, or they have there's a lack of political will in order to change the situation in urban transport. Those kind of problems, so these multidimensional problems, need multidimensional, very comprehensive planning approaches, and in order to meet the European targets and to solve local transport problem, we have sustainable urban mobility concept as a new generation of transportation planning. And what we see here is that we have already good examples for very comprehensive planning approaches in several cities. Let's start with the European level and SUMP, how the European Union sees SUMP. It's a concept which is strongly promoted by the European Union. And the European Union provides a policy framework, for example, with the white paper on transport, where it's the first document where the European Union really addresses European transport. Before that, they mainly addressed on long distance transport, but now they see that cities is not only the source of emission, but it must be part of the solution to get a better mobility. In addition to that, the European Union offers funding for implementation and research and innovation. And here you see in this table an example for the Horizon 2020 call and the Mobility for Growth, what kind of budget is provided for urban mobility and urban infrastructure. Facilitate an exchange of experiences and best practice in the context of different projects is also facilitated. And if, for example, with the European Mobility Week, there is a strong aim of awareness raising. You might already know that in 2013 the Urban Mobility Package has been released, and this sets the ground for SUMP, and it provides the basis for a debate across the EU. But it also calls for action from the member states. The European Union has not the power to get into contact with the city itself, but negotiates especially with the member states, and they call for more action from the member states. They want to reinforce their support with the exchange of experience and best practice, with funding for implementation and funding for research and innovation. And it should give further help for cities to develop SUMP and give recommendations for coordinated action in specific areas and specific mobility measures. So to come now from the European perspective to the more national perspective, because besides the European policy level, more the national level is much more important for the local level. And the national level is typically responsible for setting up the policy and the legislative and funding framework for the cities. And as you already know and might know, is that the national policy can significantly impact the ability of the local authorities or cities to act on mobility as issues and to change their mobility pattern. We have already very good examples for strong national policies to promote sustainable urban mobility planning, which you can find in France for already 15 years in Flanders and Belgium, and also in England and Wales. And recently also Romania has enacted an SUMP legislation, and also added Brazil, which has kind of a also a strong demand now to develop SUMP in all cities.
Susanne?
The mobility patch, yes?
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. I would like to find out at this point, I'm just curious, you've noticed that there are several countries that you say are relatively supportive with sustainable urban mobility planning. I'd like to put a question out to everybody at this point, which means I'm going to take the screen again for a moment. And
yes, please.
Just ask, sorry to interrupt you right in the middle, one more question with regard to sustainable urban mobility planning, what your experience is. And so I think you should see the question on your screen now. Do you feel supported at your local level by the national level of government in your country? And this is probably easier for people to answer who work for a local government, I understand. But I would just be curious, I think it would be interesting for you to know as well what the impressions are of the people here with regard to support from different levels of government. So we've got 64% responded. I'll just give you another 10 seconds to get the last couple of responses in. Okay, that looks like the end. And I'll just show you the results so you can all see this yourselves too. So interestingly, it looks quite positive. 42% feel there is support, 31% to some extent anyway, and 19% said no. I'll just ask if I can do at this point, from the 19% that said no, would you like to add any further comments to that? Or I don't know if you want to tell us where you're from, but I'll open the floor up for a moment to any hands or questions if anybody would like to make any comments on that. I don't see any hands going up, and I haven't seen anything written here. All right, that's all right. I was just curious, but I think it's interesting information for us to see as well what the impressions are of people in different cities and countries. So I'll pass it back to you, Susanne, and you can continue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
There you go. And just so everybody's warned, I will have one more question later on, but just I'll give this back to you at this point. Go ahead.
That was actually, yeah, thank you, Bonnie. That was really quite interesting to see that, but it doesn't say so much it's only legislation, but also support, so also financial support. And I do think that a lot of national authorities provide those kind of support financially or from a guiding side. And actually, if there is a legislation, so to my next question or to my next slide, so how do SUMP processes start actually? So they could be very much initiated or by a top-down approach if a national legislation requires an SUMP development, like in Romania or France. So it puts a lot of pressure on the communities to come up with an SUMP. But on the other hand, it gives you quite of a clear direction to come up with a document, and normally also the national side gives kind of guidelines for the process. In a lot of countries, there are no legal requirements, and so how do this SUMP processes start? So on that, in this situation, and I think there's a bottom-up approach as well, as the initiative comes from the local level, and it can be driven by the political level. So if there is a strong political leadership, so this can start an SUMP process. But also the administration can be the initiator for an SUMP. But also in this situation, you need political support in order to carry out the SCMP process. But as well, the operational level, like the public transport operator, which is carrying out transport services, requires more strategic guidelines. How does our service should look like? What should be our goal? How should be the quality of our service? And they are calling for more strategic guidelines in order to carry out their responsibilities more properly. So those are the different approaches I see in order to start an SCMP process. So coming now to the challenges for a city in the SCMP process, and I think you are quite familiar with the SCMP cycle, which shows the different steps, the 11 steps and 32 different activities, which kind of an orientation how to structure your process. And also in the challenge project, we have identified those activities which are related to certain challenges. And we predefined the challenges a city is facing during the SCMP process. And we see that they're facing participation challenges, challenges in order to cooperate with other institutions and other political level. Also the point of measure identification, I will speak a little bit more about that later, and monitoring and evaluation. So we have 4 different challenges a city is facing during the SCMP process, and I would like to speak a little bit more in depth about that right now. So participation in SCMP development, so it's a strong requirement from the European Commission to have participation element to carry out participation in order to set up an SCMP. But on the other hand, we see that there are several barriers to carry out a participation process. Usually there's a lack of political will and a low priority given to participation. And also there's a limited financial and personal capacities in order to carry out more advanced participation formats, more interactive formats. Most of the cities are quite familiar to inform citizens and stakeholders, but not to actively integrate them into the planning process. But on the other hand, there could also be a low interest and awareness of strategic transport planning among citizens and stakeholder groups. So how to interest those groups in order to actively participate in your process. So what were our findings? What are our findings? How to move forward? What can be done in order to tackle those barriers? So to develop a local participation guideline and a dedicated participation plan could help in order to have kind of a concept, what should be carried out, what is useful for us, and what are the appropriate formats for our cities. And the formats should be carefully selected with respect to the available capacities, to the target group and planning phases. And what is also very important, to critically analyze the participation procedure. Institutional cooperation turns out to be a very important point in SCMP. It's the question who is carrying out the planning process, and do the initiating authority has all the planning competence, or who should sit at the table, or do we have the right institution or the right partnership in order to carry out such a comprehensive planning process. A way or points to think about in order to enhance institutional cooperation is, so do we have to build new institutions? Do we have to build new local partnerships? And and what kind of tools should we should be used to assign responsibility across the partners throughout the plan development and the delivery? So this question of institutional cooperation turns out to be quite relevant, because you need really a dedicated institution who run the whole process, which ensures that there is a cooperation also with the political body, that there is a cooperation with other departments, and that there is a cooperation with other neighboring communities. Coming now to the method selection part, and the method selection is kind of the core of an SUMP. This is kind of also the aim, in order to find the right measures for the defined city problems, and to come up with an action plan how to carry out and how to implement the selected measure. But also with method selection and with the implementation of the method, cities are facing certain challenges. And usually there's a limited availability of knowledge of measures, and also a limited evidence on the performance of measures, especially in a specific city context, which means I know that a city has implemented a very interesting policy, or a very interesting parking policy, for example, but I don't know how it will work in my city context and with my stakeholders in my spatial context. Let's start first with a few definitions for measure selection. A measure is an action which can be taken to contribute to one or more policy objectives, but we also have measure packages, which is a combination of measures grouped together to contribute to policy objectives. So this is quite, I think, not new, but as well in innovation aspect here in regard of measure selection. Option generation is the process by which measures or packages are identified for consideration and is acceptable for implementation. And option appraisal, very important, is the process by which individual measures or packages are assessed and against policy objectives. So those are the key terms of you will find when you're speaking about measure selection and option generation in the SUMP process. So what is the starting point to identify possible and measures in your SUMP context? And the starting point is to set the right questions. So what is my objective, and how can we measure them? What are the problems which we face now and in the future? So this is very important to start first of all with the assessment of the problem, and not with the selection of solutions, because politicians often decide what they want to do. So we would like to have, or we need a tram system, but do not really identify their problems and define their objectives. And in according to objectives, to find really the appropriate measure. what we see is that there is a growing range of policy measures available. There are management policy policy measures like bike sharing and walking buses, information, awareness, pricing measures, a huge range of measures available. And there are about perhaps twice as many policy measures available as in 1984. But how much do we know about them, and are we making good use of them? So this is the question.
Susanne?
Yes?
Sorry, it's Bonnie. I'm going to interrupt one more time. Just to let you know, we've got about 5 more minutes. And
okay.
I have one more question I would like to ask. Would now be a good time to do it, or shall I let you go? I know you want to talk about monitoring and evaluation as well. Would you like to do that first and I'll ask my question, or is now a good time? What do you think?
Please ask your question.
Okay, then I'm going to take the screen again, and I'd like to find out from everybody. So Susanne has been talking about the different aspects of sustainable urban mobility planning and what the challenges are around that. And so my question to you is, looking at the 4 that she identified, if you had to choose one for your own city, again, I know this is easier for people who are involved in cities, but if you have an idea about this, I'd be curious to know, which do you think are the biggest challenges in your area, if it's among these 4? And I know Susanne hasn't talked about monitoring and evaluation yet, but I imagine people could say for themselves where they think the challenges are. We've got 50% voted. I'll just give you another 15 more seconds. %, and that looks like the end. And I've closed it, and I'll show you what the results were. This could be interesting for you, Susanne, as well, I'm sure. So it looks like the institutional cooperation is the biggest challenge among the people that were voting here today, followed by participation.
Yeah.
So interesting, you talk about measure identification as a challenge, certainly, but it seems to be less of a challenge for some people anyway than cooperation, which is interesting, the human factor. Okay, I'm going to stop this. I'll give it back to you, and again, say about 4 or 5 more minutes, because I'd like to have a bit of time for some questions at the end as well.
Yeah, perfect.
So here we go, back to you.
Yeah. I need the screen, Bonnie.
I thought I gave it to you.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's it. Okay,
there it is.
That was really very. This was really very interesting. This is something we also found out, that institutional cooperation is really a big issue, and very complex topic, and definitely something we should address more in detail too. So let's continue with the selection of policy measures. So, but no one policy measure will be sufficient alone. So, develop a package is the question. How to develop a package? So, to use the full range of policy measures to ensure that each policy measure reinforces the other, and use one policy measure to help overcome the barriers to using another. And so, for example, park and ride and new rail service, there are synergies, or bus service improvement making congestion charging more acceptable, or speed limit for cars makes walking and cycling more attractive. There are examples for innovative measure selection in tight cities. I would like to give you some information about. So, for example, in Spain, in Huasca, their road user charging was integrated into the SCMP. And in Bologna, in Italy, they have a target to integrate a bus app into there. It's a feedback system for clients into the SCMP. So the tight cities decided to use SCMP to mainstream their innovative or a very specific, they found very useful measure into there. So to have a long-term strategy with this measure. Implementation is not the end of the road. All new measures or packages should be evaluated against the full set of agreed objectives to identify the weaknesses and need for improvement, to provide improved evidence for future option generation, and as a crucial input to policy transfer. And I was quite surprised to see that only 88% see that monitoring evaluation is a big challenge. I think what we see usually is that there is really a very limited experience with evaluation. One of the key problems is the availability of data in the city and the lack of tools and methodologies. What we are currently developing here at Rupprecht Consult is a quality assessment scheme. In order to ask or to answer the question, does your plan or does my plan meet the quality criteria of the European Commission? And what you see here from 1 to 8 are the quality criteria set by the European Commission. And what we are doing right now is we are developing a quality assessment scheme, and specifically for the city of Vienna and for Brașov and Constanța in Romania. But we would like to offer to all cities and also interested experts a self-assessment scheme, and this should be available online in early 2015. And we would like to invite you to participate in the test and to check our self-assessment scheme. And there will be the opportunity to be certified, to receive a certification for the SCMP in a quality assessment. So my summary and conclusion is that there is a strong evidence that cities need a more strategic, comprehensive planning approach like SCMP. SCMP is an innovative planning concept providing innovative approaches to address local challenges more effectively. And SCMP provides the chance to incorporate new policy measures and packages and to have a broad consultation process about that. Besides those different challenges or these operational challenges I have introduced to you, cities are facing a variety of challenges in the SCMP process in the implementation of innovative measures and packages, like finding a common vision for transport and urban development. These are really key questions. Effective governance and leadership you need for an SCMP process, which might take 2 years or so. You need a long-term political commitment to carry out an SCMP process and really to implement the SCMP. How do I ensure that my SCMP has a strong link with land use planning? And you need a long-term funding commitment. So, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this gives you, my presentation gave you a kind of an inside view into the current findings of the SCMP and sustainable mobility planning. Thank you.